Hi guys, how are you all doing? Today I thought we'd do a special little video where I'd look at some cards which are in Elder Scrolls Legends, specifically legendaries, which just don't get used, and I've taken two from each attribute and I'm literally just going to discuss what they do, how they're meant to be used, and how I think they could have been improved to see more play. So without further ado, let's get into strength. So the first card I've chosen is Modron Arain because of his funny old picture that he puts in Oblivion, and more importantly because he's a card that I actually got a premium one of when I was doing my pack opening back in the day, but never found a use for. So what he is a 4-cost 4/4 with Breakthrough who summons 2 Blackwood Hoodlums to your opponent's side, and when they're destroyed he gains 2 health and 2 power. Now, I mean, it's a nice idea that he kind of gets stronger from destroying specific units, which he, as a character, was trying to destroy. But the issue is, you're giving your opponent 2 units, which they can easily defend, and then destroy Arain, so they just gain 2 units for free with pretty much redundant effects now. And the fact is that it's quite a slow card, and it has weak initial stats for Legendary. It's not really anything too impressive. So maybe if he was like a 3-cost, or he had stronger stats, or the last gasp abilities of the Hoodlums were something like give an opposing creature +2/+2, or if Modron Arain is still alive, give him +3/+3, or something like that, just so, you know, it wasn't too situational that he couldn't do anything. Or if there was, like, say, a support which would summon a Hoodlum to your opponent's side of the field, but with no power and 1 health, like almost how targets are, but made for, more specifically, Modron Arain. The next one is World Eater's Eyrie, which I don't actually think is too bad a card. It's a non-unique 6-cost support, which is whenever you summon a creature which costs 7 or more, it will double its power and health. I think the reason why this doesn't see play is just because that's pretty much going to be doubling 1 card per turn's health and power, and that is a bit slow. I mean, you'll notice a common theme with these cards I've chosen are that they are a bit slow. Even though when you pair this up with something like Aspect of Hircine, you could very easily get out a 24/24 guard or a 12/12 charge. And when you think about it like that, it seems really strong. But I think it was just that issue of you'd only be buffing up 1 card per turn, and there were better things to run. Kind of just because having it as a support is, like I've said, slower than just your other aggro abilities. And that does mean if you are making it this late with an aggro deck, usually you're already in a position where you're winning or you've already lost. So a card like this would make you go to a rate of slowness where you'd just lose the game. Personally, I'm not too sure how you'd be able to fix this card because it is actually really good. It's just the tempo that most decks are these days means that it can't really be run. I mean, imagine if you did get this on a Siege Crawler though, and it becomes a 30/30 Breakthrough for 11 costs. Right, so moving on to intelligence, we have J'zargo, who is a 4-cost 3/4, who when summoned will put an elemental scroll in your hand, and it won't tell you what it will do, but be one of these 3 effects. So either deal 2 damage to each enemy creature, give each creature 2 random keywords, or deal 5 damage to each player. I feel like if it told you what these scrolls did, he might seem a bit more playable, but then I guess Flame Cloak could be a big piss take. The only time I've ever seen J'zargo be run was when the player got Flame Cloak and then killed themselves with it by accident. And I think it's just that, obviously, risk and RNG where you might not get the effect which helps you, which kind of makes him a bit bad. And the fact that he's already a 4-cost on top of another 4-cost to get an actual effect. And with stats like his, he's not really flexing much for a unique legendary. So if he was like a 2 or a 3-cost, I could see him getting a lot more play, even if that is just for the raw body he has at that point. But no, I do think if, say, like Flame Cloak didn't damage you or something like that, he would instantly receive a ton more play for that power. Next we have the Bringer of Nightmares, a 7-cost Daedra with 4 power and 4 health, and when summoned you'll see a vision of a random creature and you must choose a creature on the board to transform into that. So this is actually a mediocre effect, because if your opponent's got something really strong, you've got something really strong, you've got something really weak, and your opponent's got something really weak, no matter what you see, you know what you'll roughly transform. And I think the reason why it doesn't seem any kind of play is just because of the level of RNG, and cards like Wabberjack and stuff like that, as they're neutral, they aren't forced into any attribute, while this is forced into intelligence. So maybe for this, make it like a 6 cost or something. Again, it's another weird one where maybe actually a good idea could be if it shows you 3 creatures and you get to choose a creature and then transform something on the board into that, just because then you've got a bit more choice instead of it just being, oh, I've seen a mediocre card, this will be a slight upgrade, I guess, to something on my board, and makes you kind of wonder why you put a legendary in your deck. Right, moving on to willpower, we have Varon Aquilarius. I can't say his last name very well. It's Varon, okay? He's a 4-cost 4/6. When one of your runes is broken, instead of drawing a card, you gain 5 health. I think the reason why this card isn't run is because unless you got stuff like Ebonheart Oracle down, 5 health back from losing a rune isn't really worth it. And the draw power that you get from having your runes broken, either through prophecies or just getting additional cards, is always quite helpful. And I mean, if you're running a draw heavy deck, I can sort of see the use of this. Or if you're using one which heavily relies on you healing and like throwing in Ring of Namira. But I feel like it's just that issue of, if it was, say, you gained health and drew the card as well, but it just couldn't hit prophecies or something, then it would definitely see a lot more play. Because the thing is, this is a unique legendary. I don't really see the harm of it also allowing you to gain 5 health in addition to drawing a card, as you're only going to have one of these in your deck, and if it gets destroyed, that effect gone. Next we have Joffrey, who's a 5-cost 3/9, and when you summon him, you choose another friendly creature, and any damage that creature would take, Joffrey takes instead. Again, I have seen this card played a couple of times, but I think it's just, as it can't stop things like direct removal, like piercing javelins and stuff like that, it just doesn't seem that necessary. If this card would be destroyed or banished, destroy/banish Joffrey instead, as well as the whole damage side as well on top, I could definitely think it would get a bit more play, just as it's then something which would completely protect a unit. And although the effects I'm recommending for these cards might seem strong, like I mentioned with Varon, these are unique legendaries. You're only going to get one in your deck of 50 or 75 cards, depending on whether you're running 2 or 3 attributes. So having them have these really nice, strong effects, which assist you while they're on the board, I don't really see the harm in it, as most players aren't going to be running too many because they're going to be on somewhat of a budget when making their deck. But I do think Joffrey is a good card anyway, how he is, and I just think mainly because he came around in Jaws of Oblivion, there wasn't too much time left with the game until a few players dropped off, and then it came down to a lot more restricted invade decks. Over in agility, we have Gentleman Jim Stacy, a 7-cost 5/4, and when he's summoned, your opponent chooses a card in their hand and gives it to you. I have seen this card as well, but it was much more when I was getting into Legends, and I could kind of see the issue being that most times when this card's played, either you try and do it when your opponent's got a really small hand and you think, oh, I'm going to grab something great which they were desperately waiting to use, and then you end up seeing how much of a brick they had in their hand, or they've got a very large hand and they just give you a card which isn't very essential. I feel like if it was almost something where you got to reveal your opponent's hand and they got to choose one, or maybe reveal the strongest creature in your opponent's hand, and then basically that they can choose that card, or another one at random gets taken from their hand, or something which kind of just adds a bit of even RNG, just something which makes it so your opponent can't just go, oh, here's this terrible card that I wasn't too fussed about using. Unless you can like see what's in their hand already through very, very limited reveal cards in Legends, there's barely any time when you could get off this effect nicely. So yeah, I'd say the way to fix it would either be make it randomly takes a card out your opponent's hand, or it reveals a couple as well on the same side as letting you have one of their cards. Right, next we have Devious Bandit, a 6-cost 3/5 who when summoned will deal 3 damage to your opponent and lets you gain 3 health. And this card also has all the pilfer abilities of your creatures. Honestly, I don't know why this isn't run. This is actually just really good, because it's instantly damaging your opponent, giving you health, and because it's damaging your opponent, any pilfer abilities this card will have will go off. And because it has all the pilfer abilities of your creatures on the board, it could have up to 7 different pilfer abilities, which is quite crazy. It might be that it is a bit slow, or I mean slow high costed maybe, and that fact of you can't easily just go, oh, I'll put down 2 or 3 units this turn, then summon my Devious Bandit, unless you're very late game. So maybe if this was like a 5-cost 2/2, it might see a bit more play. I don't know, I'm not really too sure why this one isn't that popular, because I mean it's the correct typing for a pilfer deck. It's got a very nice ability, it heals you, it could have multiple pilfers. Maybe if it had like 1 pilfer ability of its own, like gain 1 health or something really weak, just so it's always got pilfer, that could definitely make it see a lot more play. Okay, over in Endurance we have Innkeeper Delphine, 3-cost 2/3, and after you play a dragon or a shout, Innkeeper Delphine changes into Grandmaster Delphine, who is a 3-cost 5/5 who can't be targeted or damaged by enemy dragons. See, a reason why a card like this isn't very good, it's fine, the effect of that she transforms when you play the card, because it means that it's very easy for you to kind of get her into Grandmaster Delphine, who has a very nice stat block for a 3-cost. But the issue is that the further effect of can't be damaged or targeted by dragons requires your opponent to be playing a dragon deck. See, let's say they made a card which was just like a legendary, which was Random Prisoner or Imperial City Prisoner, and it's like after you play a Daedra or your opponent plays a Daedra, turn into the Champion of Cyrodiil who can't be damaged or targeted by Daedra. It would be really good because Daedra's the current meta, but let's say they made another expansion which completely topped everything, cards like that would just slowly fall out of place. So I think with Delphine it's the case of she was a really good card, but now that Daedra kind of topple all these dragon decks in popularity, she's nowhere near as good as she used to be. But I mean, in the occasional matchup she's still really good, and I think the issue there is that there's not much you can really do about it. Right, next we have Lich's Ascension, a 7-cost ongoing support, which makes all your cards cost 0, but you can only play 1 card per turn. Right, I think the instant issue with this is that even if you've got like Alduin in hand, Paarthurnax, Odahviin, all these really powerful cards, and you can just easily summon 1, it does mean later when you're like drawing a bit better that you might only play 1 2-cost card in a turn, and that's all you've done. So cards like Lich's Ascension, it really slows down your pace as well, knowing that you can only play 1 card. So I think maybe a much more like better way with this card would be to increase its like cost to maybe like 9 or 10, but make it so instead of it's ongoing, you can activate it on a turn or 2. So give it say 2 uses for instance, and then be like, for this turn your cards will cost 0, but you can only play 1 card this turn. But that would mean it would be something which you'd have to activate at the start of your turn or something, just so you don't play a bunch of cards, then activate it, and then get like a free Alduin alongside your board swarm of a bunch of other cards. But again, it is a nice idea, just too slow. Right, next we have Battle of Shalman Keep, which I think's actually got one of the nicest card arts in the entire game. And this is a 5-cost action which will fill every lane in the board with 1/1 recruits and give every single creature guard. It's a really nice idea of a card if you've got a bunch of supports which buff your side of the field, but other than that, it's just kind of blocking everywhere. If you've got completely empty lanes and your opponent's got a lot of things on their side of the field and maybe he's missing like 1 or 2 slots, I guess it's also nice just to kind of get equal matching for a cheap price, but I don't really see a point in this. Actually, no, I can see a point in this. Put it in a sleigh deck, but then the issue would be that you've only got one of them. But no, I can see this working in a sleigh deck, but other than that, maybe an Imperial deck if you have the correct like supports and buffs for Imperials. But as there's no way of you buffing your recruits before that, it does definitely require a bit more support to recruits with cards that just don't get run that much, such as Enlistment Officer. Right, and finally we have Ill-Fated Scholar, a free cost 3/2, and when this card is consumed, it will summon a 3/2 Insidious Spirit. Again, this is just a nice card, but the issue is there's not enough cards in the game which consume for it to be worthwhile, and some of the other consume effects on much easier cards to get, aka more common ones, are almost just as good, giving cards Breakthrough, Drain, and other keywords with certain buffs. So maybe if this was like a 2 cost and, you know, it consumed something itself when it was summoned, or just had a bit more kind of to go around with it. I understand that it is a neutral card, but yeah, you're mainly, if the game just had a few more consume cards, maybe this would have seen some form of running. But as it's just summoning a spirit which doesn't have any synergy with most consume decks, yeah, there's no real point of running this at the moment. But it's all to do with, if there was another expansion which just added a few more cards to the game, maybe this one could be improved. It's nothing to do with its actual stats, that's all quite fine and dandy. But there you go, those are some of the cards in Elder Scrolls Legends, nearly said Gwent, where I just don't think they see that much play, even though they are full-on legendaries. If there's any that you think that I've missed, or that you disagree with, let me know in the comments.